States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, 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 and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something, I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up,
I
Lindsay.
want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans, and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank
you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
going
just need
to move
respond
on, Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better.
Correct.
Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that, and you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed, for the first time, Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it, pass this prologue in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
You made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
To build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like, we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughing. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
And welcome back to NBC News coverage of the debate. Pick your adjective. I would go with fiery to begin, but it goes from there. Both the candidates, you could argue, executing on their strategy going in. For Kamala Harris, that was to get under the former president's skin, which she did quite often. For the former president, his option was, of course, to go after the economy, after Afghanistan, the administration's position on the withdrawal in Afghanistan. And immigration, of course. This is exactly what they wanted. The question is how they got there and along the way, I think.
Well, people are going to be talking about this debate for a long time. And is this the final debate? Is this the only one we're going to see? Will there be another? Well, it depends on how each candidate feels they did tonight. Let's bring back our moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson. Boy, do we have a lot to chew over here.
Yes,
I mean, let's talk about, first of all, it does seem that Kamala Harris was trying to hit every trigger point she could think of to try to get Donald Trump to respond to her and to kind of fall into bait him into that trap. Do you think it was effective?
Well, let's just name a few. Abortion, January 6th. His former officials who are now critical of him. John McCain, which is a big trigger point.
His rally size.
His rally size, one of the biggest ones that gets under his skin. One of his allies said she clearly tried to get under his skin. He's being defensive way too much. He's losing his answers. For example, instead of border czar, we had eating pets. Of course, that theory that Springfield officials in Ohio are saying there's no proof that undocumented immigrants are eating pets, something that we've heard from Trump and his campaign. And I think that allies are expressing concern about the fact that he didn't do what they were hoping he would do, which is to stay on message, to talk about his strengths. There were some unanswered questions as well. It's worth noting out on both sides. Harris never answered whether you're better off than you were 4 years ago. She also didn't say what she would have done differently on immigration. Trump, by the way, didn't answer the critical question. Would he veto a national abortion ban if it came to his desk? I asked J.D. Vance if Trump would do that. He said, yes, he would. Trump said tonight, well, he didn't check with me before saying that. So some differences there. Again, how does this play with those swing voters?
Hallie, what are Republicans saying tonight that you're monitoring?
I think there's immense frustration on the part of those allied with Donald Trump about the moderators. That is something that you sometimes hear after debates. I think that is certainly a through line here. There is some frustration, I think, I spoke with one Republican who called former President Trump wild and uncontrolled and said that the vice president was successfully pushing his buttons and getting him angry. Another ally said, listen, she is doing what they thought she would do, avoiding the issues and going on attack against former President Trump. She did that, as you have laid out. She baited him again and again. We talk about substance and style being the two kind of buckets in any debate. If that's the style, you look at substance here. She was pressed on her shift away from some of those more progressive positions in that crowded primary. She says, my values haven't changed. And it wasn't just, of course, the issue of abortion access and whether he'd veto a national abortion ban that the former president did not answer on. He did not discuss how he would implement one of his central issues on immigration, mass deportations. And he also didn't get into his plan to replace Obamacare, simply saying, I have concepts of a plan. He will be pressed on that moving forward.
He also didn't commit to saying he wants Ukraine to be victorious in the war. So that was an interesting exchange as well. So she was trying to prosecute the case against him, but also present an affirmative vision of herself and what she might do in a term. Let's go to Tom Yamas. He's in the spin room for us. So, Tom, I'm sure you're already starting to see people filter in, and what are you hearing?
Yeah. Okay, guys, so it's still very early, right? Each campaign is sort of getting their talking points out and making sure everyone's on the same message before they pour into the spin room. Some people are coming in right now. There's a crush of reporters at the entrance waiting for everybody. I can tell you in the meantime, my phone has been blowing up with both Republican strategists, Democratic strategists, voters. I've been asking everyone what they think. It is a complete different shift change from that first debate. After that first debate, Republicans felt very victorious, very confident. They were saying the entire debate was about Joe Biden. This time, it's much different. Republicans seemed very frustrated with former President Trump. They also felt frustrated with the format of the debate, which is never a good sign on your side. And then also saying that they were able, at least Vice President Kamala Harris was able to make this debate not about Joe Biden, not about herself, but about Donald Trump, and that led to her advantage. So again, many of the surrogates are coming in right now. Governors, senators from different parties. We're going to be talking to them throughout the night. I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio right now.
All right, Tom, thanks. Let's bring in Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. He's a Democrat representing the Harris campaign. Governor, thank you for being here. Let me first ask you, do you think the voters were served by what we saw the last 90 minutes? served well, I guess.
Look, I think the voters heard a lot and learned a lot. You know, one of the things I was a little bit worried about going into this debate is that some folks had a little brain fog about Donald Trump. They sort of didn't remember the chaos of Donald Trump's time in office. Well, I'll tell you what, I think Kamala Harris cleared that brain fog out, reminded people of the disaster that he was as president. And I think it was also clear as she was laying out a vision to take this country, Donald Trump didn't have a clear vision on where he wanted to go. Instead, it was more grievance and division, more attacks on other people. And Donald Trump, I think, will make our country less safe, more chaotic, and less free. And Donald Trump prosecuted the heck out of the case tonight. Well, Kamala Harris prosecuted the case tonight. Pardon me.
Oh, against Donald Trump. Gotcha. Okay, got you. You know, I thought Donald Trump toward the end finally got around to what he was hoping to accomplish, which is say, if you have all these plans and you have all this vision, Kamala Harris, you've had 3.5 years to do it. Why haven't you? So what is the answer to that?
She has served as vice president. She knows the job to be president. Now she has laid out her vision for where she wants to take this country. I thought she was very specific on her plans to cut taxes, particularly for small business owners, her way of trying to bring down costs for middle-class families. Donald Trump, I don't know what the heck he thinks. He was all over the place. I think what you heard was a rambling man full of nonsense and full of a whole lot of grievance. He couldn't get past that, and he couldn't focus on anybody but himself, and that is serving the good people of this nation, something Kamala Harris has done throughout her career and has plans to do going forward.
Do you think either will have an appetite for a second debate after this one?
Look, I think that'll be up to either one of them. I'm not going to sit here and guess what'll happen. But I'll tell you what, if there is not another debate, what the American people saw tonight was a clear contrast in steady, future-looking leadership versus the chaotic, divisive leadership of the past of Donald Trump.
Governor Shapiro, thank you for being with us tonight. We appreciate it.
We're going to hear from Senator Marco Rubio in just a moment. We have a few moments to turn back to our table. So what about it? It's clear that the Democrats and the allies of Kamala Harris are very happy with the way that she prosecuted the case against Donald Trump. But we know going in, about 30% of voters were saying, we don't really know who she is or what she's about. Do you think she did enough to define herself to make that affirmative case?
I don't. There were a couple of answers where she talked about her economic plans. It's the top issue. Trump beats her on that point. I think people still have a lot of questions about what she would do on the economy.
One interesting nugget by our team's count, the former president said the name Biden something like 15 times, didn't say Kamala or Harris once. She addressed that by saying, clearly, I'm not Joe Biden. But I think that's an interesting point, is where the former president's head is at this point.
All right, let's bring in Florida Senator Marco Rubio. He's a surrogate for the Trump campaign. Senator, thanks for coming on with us. Did we see the best version of Donald Trump, in your opinion, tonight?
Well, two things. These candidates have very different objectives going in. Donald Trump's well known. He was president of the United States. He's been campaigning basically for the last 8 years, 4 years, actually going back to 2016. Most voters didn't even know who Kamala Harris was. Tonight, for the first time, they got glimpses of it. Look, I don't think the moderators did the best job of pressing her on this, but I think got glimpses of what she has stood for as recently as 2019 and 2020. And here in Philadelphia, and here in Pennsylvania, where she wanted to ban fracking. But beyond that, I think there are all kinds of things that the moderators never asked, questions that I wanted to see asked. For example, grocery prices are up 50% from 2020. What is your responsibility for that? I thought her answer on Afghanistan was complete nonsense. She was vice president at the time. Joe Biden didn't withdraw from Afghanistan. We were run out of Afghanistan. So on issue after issue, I think for the first time, voters are starting to get a glimpse of someone and starting to understand the positions that she truly believes in. She's basically cut and paste, literally cut and paste out of the Biden agenda. People don't want the Biden agenda. But what she really believes in are the radical ideas that she ran on in 2019 and 2020. I think for a lot of Americans who don't know a lot about her, tonight they were introduced to those facts. I think that's going to have an impact on this race.
Senator, you just laid out the case against her pretty clearly. Do you wish that Donald Trump had done so more clearly?
Well, I think he did. Unfortunately, like I said, look, I'm not one of these guys that likes to complain about moderators. This one was tough not to. I think it was really one-sided, and some of the fact-checking was wrong. There are, in fact, states in this country, the state of Minnesota, where a child born in a botched abortion is allowed to die, provided palliative care and allowed to die. So some of the fact-checking I thought was truly unfair, but on balance, As people heard things about, you wanted to take away guns from people in the past. You wanted the Bernie Sanders health care plan. You wanted to ban fracking. You bailed out, tried to raise money to bail out rioters in 2020 in the summer. These are new facts that a lot of people don't know about Kamala Harris that they learned tonight for the first time. And I think, as you've seen in the polling, a lot of it, 25% of Americans wanted to learn more about him. They learned more about her tonight.
All right, Senator Rubio, thank you for your time. We want to go to Kate Snow. She's been talking with a group of undecided voters in where else? Battleground, Pennsylvania. Kate, we've all been dying to hear what they thought and how they reacted to what they heard tonight.
Yeah, Savannah, it's been really interesting watching with you all because I could see your reactions in real time. There were a lot of visceral reactions. In one word, if I can ask, how would you headline this debate? One word to describe what you saw, Lynn.
Well, it's 4 words. Same old, same old.
Hannah.
Manipulative.
And Andrew.
Lies on both sides.
Okay.
Lies.
Well, you came in all undecided. Has anything changed your mind tonight? Is there anything you heard here that you thought, oh, yeah, I could go for that policy. I could stand with that candidate?
Not really. For me, I think Kamala had a good debate. I'm feel more favorably towards her than to Donald, but I'm still not sure. Not 100%.
The two of you women reacted very strongly when Harris was talking about abortion, when both candidates were talking about abortion rights. You reacted strongly to Donald Trump and his positions. You seemed emotional about it, Hannah.
Yes.
What was your thought on that? What was it about that part of the debate that struck you?
His misinformation. He sensationalized just so much facts or not things that are not facts that have been disproven.
When he was talking about,
he does it because that is what his supporters want to hear, and it really impacts who people like us if we choose to vote for him or not, because we know you are lying, but you're still saying it, and it's disgusting.
You all said it was the economy going in. Andrew, anything you heard that changes how you're thinking about their economic policies?
No, because at the end of the day, December and November is going to roll around, and they're going to pass. They're going to say we're going to shut down the government, and they're going to pass an omnibus, and they're going to spend trillions of dollars, and nothing else is going to change. They're just going to keep spending money uncontrollably. Donald Trump spent $6 trillion in 2019 and added that to our deficit. So absolutely not. They're spending money, and then it's coming back into the government, into the congressmen, into the Senate, through funds, through PACs, through all the disgustingness.
Andrew, thank you so much. Hannah, Lynn, it's great to be with you. I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, Kate, thanks very much. Kristen Welker, Hallie Jackson back for some final thoughts. Kristen, first to you. Will we know who won this debate in days or weeks or months?
Well, a couple of weeks, I would say, once we look at the new poll numbers, Lester. As we've been saying, the Harris campaign feels emboldened. They just put out a statement saying Vice President Harris is ready for a second debate. Is Donald Trump? The big question, will that actually happen? And again, it's just fascinating to hear the voters who are sitting there with Kate Snow, to hear that one of them at least feels a little bit more favorably toward Harris.
As we start to close our coverage, I always like to say Election Day is XX days away. But in fact, Election Day is, well, it starts tomorrow in one state, but is 6 days away in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Early voting is a huge factor.
Those mail-in ballots going out in Pennsylvania. You've got it in other battleground states as well coming up soon, including Michigan just this month. So that is for real, right? What's happening tonight matters when people go to make their decision about who they want in the White House. So will there be a second debate? That's an open question. You look at what's next. All 4 of these leaders, Kamala Harris and her running mate, former President Trump and his running mate, will be in 9/11 ceremonies tomorrow.
All right, Haley, thanks. Hallie, that concludes our coverage of tonight's debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump.
More coverage tomorrow morning on Today. We'll see you bright and early. I'm Savannah Guthrie, Lester Holt, Hallie Jackson, Kristen Welker. We're all here. Thanks for being with us.
Good night.
A moment as you're watching NBC News Now's live coverage of what could be the most consequential night of the 2024 presidential election. You see right there the historic handshake between Vice President Kamala Harris, here it is, and former President Trump. This is actually the first time the two of them ever met. not just on a debate stage, but in person, period. And tempers ran hot tonight with personal attacks just minutes into the hour-and-a-half-long debate. Both sides trying to play to their strengths, like Vice President Harris hammering Mr. Trump on reproductive rights, his defense of Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade, and what she called lies about abortion.
Nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America.
The former president preferring to talk more about immigration, pushing debunked claims about Haitian migrants in Ohio, and accusing the vice president of allowing undocumented immigrants into the country.
And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
Fact-checking also becoming a big part of the night, with the moderators stepping in to correct the record repeatedly, including one instance when the former president refused to back down from the false claim that he won the 2020 election.
In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof.
Let's get right to my NBC News colleagues, Peter Alexander and Garrett Hake, out there in the spin room. Peter covers the Harris campaign, Garrett, the Trump campaign. And Garrett, I want to start with you. Tell me what you're hearing from inside the Trump campaign.
Inside the Trump campaign, they're very confident in how he performed tonight. They think this foreign policy segment was the strongest part of his performance tonight. If you go one layer out, though, the Republicans who advised this campaign, who are rooting for this campaign, they are frustrated. I've been talking to Republican operatives, including some folks who are involved in the debate preparation for this president, who don't feel like he took advantage of the opportunities that were presented to him. Now, granted, some of them were frustrated about the moderators. They were frustrated about the topics. They're frustrated that Kamala Harris, for example, didn't get asked a direct question about inflation, an issue that they think is one of their strongest issues. But they realized that their guy didn't take advantage of what he was trying to do. All day I was talking to these Trump folks who told me they wanted to make Kamala Harris own the most liberal past positions that she's taken. And really only on the issue of fracking do they feel like they were successful. They just wasn't able to tie her to the things they felt like they needed to tie her to have a clear win tonight.
Are you getting the sense, because I'm getting the sense from the Republicans I'm talking to, it was a shift change when you compare it to the Atlanta debate? Coming out of the Atlanta debate, I mean, they were victorious, they were happy, they were congratulating each other. Here it's much different. There's frustration, there's anger, they're blaming moderators. And I think you're right, with that outside layer, they're frustrated a little bit with the former president. Has the former president spoken out yet? Has he posted yet anything on Truth Social?
He's posted two things.
Yeah.
One, suggesting that it was a strong debate performance because it was 3-on-1, so his own complaint about the moderators. I expect we'll hear more of that. And he posted a meme of him with AI-generated cats, a nod to that line where he was arguing with the moderator about immigrants eating pets, which I think, you know, just as my own view, feels like somebody who's much more online than millions of viewers here tonight who are probably going to have no idea what he's even referencing. Right. I think that is not the turf that a campaign that wants to be fighting for the middle of the country perhaps wants to be fighting on.
We should mention Senator J.D. Vance, the running mate, is somewhere here in the spin room. He's gaggling with reporters. We'll bring you that sound as soon as we have it. I do want to ask you about that moment, though, when the moderators asked former President Trump about something J.D. Vance had said about vetoing a national abortion bill. Talk to me about that moment, because it seemed like the ticket wasn't on the same page.
No, this is really striking. I mean, Donald Trump has had, over the course of his career, every conceivable position on abortion. Where he has landed now is that he believes it's an issue for the states, and he has used that to avoid taking direct questions about what, if any, federal policy he would take. He has not answered directly about whether he would veto a national abortion ban. But when J.D. Vance was on Meet the Press, I guess 2 weeks ago now, Kristen Welker asked him about this, and he kind of took Trump's position to what a lot of people thought was the logical conclusion. If he doesn't support a ban, yes, I suppose he would veto it. Trump wouldn't go that far tonight. And, Tom, that's the second time I can think of off the top of my head where Trump has distanced himself from a sort of Vance projection of a Trump position. Now on abortion, also on the child tax credit, where Vance has proposed a much more generous expansion of the child tax credit than Trump has. When you and your, ticket mate are not on the same page, that is a problem for a ticket. If J.D. Vance can't credibly speak for Donald Trump, what's he out there talking about?
Right. Garrett Hake, stand by for us. I know when you have new reporting, we'll come back to you during this broadcast. I want to go to my friend Peter Alexander, who's out there in the middle of the spin room somewhere. Peter, give me a sense of what's happening inside the Harris-Walz campaign right now, what they're telling you.
Yeah, Tom, let's walk through a series of items that have been breaking and developing as you two have been speaking right now. We'll start in order. First, we've heard from the communications director from Kamala Harris, a man by the name of Brian Fallon, who immediately after this debate wrapped up, posted on social media, "That was fun. Let's do it again in October." Clearly a message being sent by the Harris campaign for the first time publicly that they would like there to be a second Harris-Trump debate. We're waiting for any response from the Trump campaign. We'll try to bring that to you as soon as we hear about it. Separately, we are hearing from a senior Harris campaign official who is describing this in their words as just a plethora of, how do they say it specifically? They said basically that they had more to work with than they could have possibly imagined, that they had so much that they were hoping to amplify over the course of this night, and most notably, they focus on the topic of abortion. Specifically, it's on that issue where, according to the Harris campaign's dial groups, they say they saw a dramatic gap, one of the biggest gaps they've ever seen, particularly from the voters, women in particular, who were focused on this, saying that they were satisfied, pleased, and supportive of the words they heard from Kamala Harris. It's a message you're going to hear going forward. And then most notably, and perhaps most importantly in terms of the potential influence it will have on those young voters and other voters, Taylor Swift, with 283 million followers on her Instagram account, within the last 5 minutes, has just publicly come out in favor of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, saying that she will be voting for them. She said she came to this conclusion after she saw that there was an AI, an artificial intelligence, false account that suggested she would be supporting Donald Trump. And she said the best way to be transparent about her views was to make it very clear publicly where she stood on this issue. She says, "I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. I'm voting for Kamala Harris," she added, "because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them." Just to put that in some context here, remember only a matter of months ago when Joe Biden was the presidential nominee for the Democrats, there was a real concern among Democrats that they weren't getting the support within the young voter community, those first-time voters in many cases, that they weren't energized by a man who was already 81 and would be 86 at the end of a second term if he was to serve. Obviously, Kamala Harris tonight, as you heard, casting herself as a generational candidate. They feel strongly, and certainly with this endorsement from Taylor Swift tonight, that sends a very clear message, first from the debate and separately from her social media, about the value that young people may find in a Harris presidency going forward. And finally, I'll just tell you, based on the takeaways I've had speaking to analysts in this room and hearing from Democrats and Republicans alike, one of the things that frustrated Republicans, frankly, and satisfied a lot of Democrats, Tom, was the sense that Kamala Harris, though she didn't answer some questions, which is receiving some criticism, she did not say, which perhaps was stunning to critics, that America is better off now than it was 4 years ago. They do believe she succeeded in making this a referendum not so much about the Biden-Harris administration, but about Donald Trump himself. It's one place that we're hearing from a lot of Democrats so far tonight. Back to you.
I'm hearing that as well. Before you go, Peter, I do want to ask you, can you get a sense yet if there will be a second debate, if Democrats will even want that, or is it one and done?
Yeah, Tom, no, just to the first point I was making, Brian Fallon, of course, the communications director, as we just indicated, he came out publicly immediately after this. He said, "That was fun. Let's do it again in October." He is the communications director for the Harris campaign. So it appears pretty clear that their message is, we're glad to do this again. We're waiting for any reaction from the Trump campaign. They had said in the past, he had said publicly, anytime, anywhere. That was focused on a Joe Biden debate. He has said publicly that he'd be glad to do other debates as well. He was pushing for a Fox News debate. But again, to be clear, at least to the best of my reporting right now, and I defer to colleagues if they've heard anything in the last 3 minutes, we have not yet heard from the Trump campaign in response to that.
All right, Peter Alexander, we appreciate all your reporting. Joining our special coverage now is Republican Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas in the spin room here as a surrogate for the Trump campaign. Senator Cotton, thank you so much for joining us. Your thoughts first coming out of this debate.
Well, I thought this was a very good debate for President Trump. It laid out a clear contrast between not empty promises or slogans or predictions about what these candidates would do, but their clear records. It's a very unusual presidential election. President Trump has been in office before, first time in 100 years it's happened. We know what what kind of president President Trump would be. He brought peace, prosperity, and stability around the world. Under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, we have record high inflation, wages are stagnant, the border is wide open, and we've had war and conflict all around the world. So no matter what you heard from Kamala Harris tonight, there's a clear record here to compare with President Trump's record.
And former President Trump said that. The problem was it was in the last 2 minutes of this debate. Do you think the vice president was successful in making this debate about Donald Trump and not about Biden-Harris?
No, I think she was successful in hiding her own liberal record to the best of her ability. President Trump did a good job of calling it out, though, not only in his closing statement, but throughout the debate, pointing out, for instance, that she does, in fact, support a ban on fracking. She supports a ban on gas-powered cars. She does want to confiscate private firearms. She wants to decriminalize illegal immigration. And as we just learned this week, she wants to use taxpayer dollars to pay for gender transition surgery for illegal immigrants in detention centers in America. Those are all records she's taken, not as a young woman in college or in a TV interview, kind of in a live setting where people could put a foot wrong, as you know, Tom. Those are her considered, deliberate positions that she took when she was running for president in her own right, or when she was serving the United States Senator.
And she said that she's, changed on some of those positions. Well, they're saying evolved, and you guys say flip-flop. I get it, but I just want to go on the record and say that she's changed on some of those positions.
Actually, no. I don't say she's flip-flopped. She's lying. Bernie Sanders on your network said this weekend that she hasn't changed her positions. She's saying what she thinks she needs to get elected.
Right, that she's still a progressive. I do want to ask you, why do you think Republicans, at least the ones that I'm talking to that are strategists, voters, were frustrated with this debate? It was a much different vibe coming out of that Atlanta debate. What was different about this one? Why are you guys frustrated? A lot of you.
I mean, come on. The Atlanta debate was historic. I mean, President Trump ended his opponent's presidential campaign. I don't think you could expect that to happen again.
Right. But I think there's real frustration with some Republicans.
He did a great job tonight. I thought in some ways it was 3-on-1. All the fact checks that President Trump got, and they never fact checked Kamala Harris. She claimed that she doesn't support abortion in months 7, 8, or even 9 of a pregnancy, when in fact she voted to do that in the U.S. Senate. They didn't put.
I got to say, but if you're going to be commander-in-chief, you know this. You can stand up to 2 journalists, right? I mean, even though you guys may have thought that moderators weren't fair.
And he did. I thought he did a good job in what was in effect a 3-on-1 debate. But Kamala Harris.
You think she was better prepared?
No, not at all. Because you can't. I mean, how can you be prepared to defend a ban on fracking, especially in Pennsylvania, to defend a ban on the sale of new gas-powered cars? These are her positions. This is what she supported as vice president and as a senator and as a soft-on-crime attorney general.
Before we go, do you think there's another presidential debate?
I don't know. I mean, President Trump proposed several other debates. Kamala Harris refused to take him up on it. I think if we had another debate, you'd see more of what you saw tonight, which is a clear contrast in these records, but I'll leave that to President Trump.
We spoke to a bunch of undecided voters that were watching this debate. They say after this debate, they're still undecided. So we'll have to wait and see. We have another debate. Senator, we thank you for your time. We appreciate that. I want to send it back to Hallie Jackson in New York, who's going to pick up some of our coverage right now.
Tom Yam is there in the very busy, very active spin room. Tom, thank you very much. Let me bring it back to the folks here at the table for us. Moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, our national political reporter, and big board icon Steve Kornacki. Our chief political analyst, Chuck Todd, is with us as well. Kristen, let me go to you. You've heard now from the folks that Tom is talking to, from our reporters on the ground there. We've seen that Taylor Swift endorsement. Give us a sense of what things look like tomorrow morning, right? We're going to wake up. There's going to be a news cycle that unfolds. What does that look like?
Look, I think that Vice President Kamala Harris is going to feel emboldened after tonight. We've reported a lot about all of her preparations, her strategy to get under former President Trump's skin. She clearly did that on a range of issues, on abortion, January 6th, his crowd sizes. She brought up John McCain at the end. At the same time, while you have Trump allies saying, look, he was on the defensive way too much tonight. You also have some Harris allies saying she needs to now flesh out her economic proposals and answer that question that was left unanswered at the top of the debate about why people should feel better now than they did 4 years ago, and what she's going to do in the future to make people feel better about the high price of groceries, for example, how she's going to bring that down. You did hear her lay out some of her policies. I don't want to say that she didn't at all, but that is the #1 issue for voters. Right now, Trump beats her. She's catching up to him on that issue, but her allies believe she should be hammering those points over and over again, that basically today and this evening and the debate was the start to what now she should take the momentum and move forward.
Okay, so Kristen, you're talking economy. Chuck, let me come to you because reproductive rights is an issue where Kamala Harris sees a political vulnerability and a potential liability with Donald Trump here. That came up tonight. It is an issue where she outpolls him. I'm curious how you see that framing, considering that is something that campaign officials, as you heard from the conversation just a moment ago, on the Harris side, see as one of her strongest moments. And I got to tell you, Chuck, on this issue of sort of baiting, well, let me start there. Let me start on reproductive rights, and I'll come back to you on something else.
Okay, well, let me just stick to that issue for a second. Here's all I kept thinking about when she was talking very specifically about a woman sitting in the parking lot, potentially bleeding out because she wasn't going to get care because there was concern about the law. You know who wouldn't have made that rebuttal on that issue? Joe Biden. And it was so striking to me. Joe Biden could barely talk about the issue. It was really one of the biggest weaknesses of the campaign he was running is his inability, whatever it is, his own, I think he was caught up in his own political positions, his own religious beliefs on this. Frankly, 40 years of talking about abortion one way, and then suddenly the conversation had changed and he didn't really evolve or modernize with it. That is what sort of struck me. Like here was an issue that is suddenly, I think the contrast is much clearer between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump than it was between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Everything else, you wouldn't have had that kind of clear contrast. But on that issue, more than any other, that was something you never would have seen from Joe Biden, no matter which version of Joe Biden you got, 2016, 2020, or the one we saw last June.
I'm going to call a quick timeout for just a second because, as we all know, spin rooms move fast. Things go quickly. I know that somebody has just sat down, I think, next to Tom back in Philadelphia. So, Tom, let me turn it over to you for just a second, and then we'll come back and chat.
All right, Hallie, thank you for that. Yeah, joining us now, California Governor Gavin Newsom, a surrogate, of course,